Hi, Michelle. Please come to La Mexicana restaurant, the one across from the station, as soon as you can. The whole family is here waiting for you. La Mexicana restaurant? You mean that fancy Dutch place? What do you mean the whole family is waiting? Actually, I booked the place and invited everyone, even the relatives who usually can't make it. The bill will be around $51,000, and I'll be paying with your credit card. Please hurry. With that, my husband, Dennis, hung up the phone. Am I really paying $51,000? That's crazy. I just stood there in disbelief. I wasn't shocked or surprised, just really frustrated by my husband's foolishness. He really doesn't get it. Even though I had everything under control, my husband has put himself in a terrible situation, and I'm seriously thinking about letting him face the consequences. With that thought, I left the house. 15 minutes later, I arrived at La Mexicana restaurant. Dennis was waiting by himself and greeted me with a strange smile that didn't fit the fancy setting of the place. It seems the relatives are already waiting in another room, but Dennis started bragging right away, using this moment to his advantage. Michelle, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be using your credit card. It might seem harsh, but a wife's money belongs to her husband, right? It's only natural for a wife to support her husband. You don't have any objections, do you? I was speechless. I couldn't believe his foolishness. According to Dennis, 30 relatives have gathered, and he booked the most luxurious meal at $1,700 per person. La Mexicana restaurant is indeed a high-end Dutch place, known for offering delicious courses at reasonable prices, but Dennis purposely chose the most expensive one, as if making his wife suffer is his favorite hobby. Completely unaware of the trouble he's creating for himself, Dennis seemed quite pleased. In such a ridiculous situation, all I could do was laugh. A wife's money belongs to her husband? It's natural for a wife to support her husband? But, I stopped that a month ago. What do you mean you stopped? You can't just quit being a wife. Divorce takes formal procedures, you know that, right? Dennis, you really don't get it. If you did, you wouldn't have booked such an expensive place. How do you plan to pay without any money? Are you planning to dine and dash? I'd never do something that stupid. I'll say it again. I'm paying with your credit card. If you don't like it, I'll make sure you really stop being my wife. At that moment, I pulled out a document and shoved it in front of him. I was ready to show just how clueless he was. I canceled that credit card a month ago. Here's the cancellation notice because I knew you wouldn't believe me. The card doesn't work anymore, so tell me with no money, what are you going to do? Are you planning to run away?
What?
I can't use your credit card? That's impossible. This cancellation paper must be fake because I took the card from your purse. If it was really canceled, why would you keep it in there? So, you're admitting you took it from my purse? I left the canceled card there because I knew you might try to steal it. You totally fell for it. Poor thing. Michelle, what's with that attitude? A wife shouldn't talk to her husband like that. Dennis sees himself as superior to me, so it must be unbearable for him to feel outsmarted by someone he thinks is beneath him. His frustration boiled over, and he raised his voice, not caring about who might hear. Even though we were in a corner of the restaurant, his loud voice caught the attention of the staff, and the place started to buzz with whispers. Seeing this, Dennis quickly forced a smile and tried to calm things down, but the murmurs continued. His face turned red with embarrassment, but compared to the trouble ahead, this was nothing. Soon my in-laws came over. It seemed Dennis's voice had reached the other relatives too. Dennis, what are you doing? Everyone is shocked, and you're disturbing the other guests. Look, people are watching. I just got a bit carried away. It's nothing serious, so don't worry. It seemed my in-laws hadn't heard the details of our conversation and looked confused, but they didn't say anything more. Dennis kept smiling, trying to smooth things over, but he was probably relieved that his parents-in-law had shown up. He always puts on a perfect husband act in front of them, especially since he works at his father's company. I also looked shocked, just like my in-laws, but Dennis gave me a quiet look, as if to say, "Don't say anything unnecessary. I won't forgive you if you do." I felt his usual pressure to intimidate and control me. I was scared and used to going along with it, but this time I couldn't take it anymore. Dennis inviting the relatives turned out to be the perfect chance to show everyone his true colors. I started talking to my in-laws about paying the bill. Dennis planned to use my credit card. He took it from my purse and made the reservation without asking me. My in-laws were surprised. That card was actually canceled a month ago, but Dennis didn't know and was going to use it anyway. He doesn't have any money, so how is he planning to pay? I explained. Wait a minute, Michelle. Are you saying Dennis took your card and was going to use it to pay today? Dennis said he'd cover the $51,000 bill himself. If what you're saying is true, was he really going to stick you with the $51,000? That's hard to believe. Could there be some misunderstanding? My in-laws were clearly shaken. This was their usual reaction, finding it hard to believe, even when it was the truth. Dennis, wanting to hide this, started talking cheerfully with a forced smile. Michelle is mistaken. I plan to treat everyone with my own money. I'll handle the payment, so don't worry. Then he went to the cashier, throwing me a creepy smile. It was obvious he didn't believe the card was canceled, even after I showed him the cancellation certificate. A while later, Dennis came back smiling. My in-laws looked relieved, thinking the payment had gone through. But I could see Dennis was tense. Inside, he was probably panicking, thinking, this is bad. The card didn't work. Of course, it didn't. I'd canceled it. He had no way to pay the $51,000 himself, and I knew what he was hiding. I gave him a cold stare and said, "Tell the truth before this gets worse." He realized what I meant, and his face changed. After thinking it over, he finally confessed. "Sorry, Dad, Mom. I couldn't make the payment. Michelle's card really was canceled." "Is that true? Were you planning to use Michelle's card to pay?" "It's all a misunderstanding," Dennis stammered. "It's true that I intended to pay today's expenses with Michelle's credit card, and I thought we had discussed this properly. I was just shocked to find out the card had already been canceled. I apologize, but I'll have to ask you to cover the cost for now. I will definitely pay you back." He mixed lies and truth to try to get out of the situation, showing remarkable nerve. Then he whispered to me, "Why did you cancel the credit card? Are you trying to embarrass me?"
Why?
"It's obvious I didn't want you using it without my permission. The real issue is that you took the card without asking, not the embarrassment it caused," I replied boldly. He looked surprised and quickly interrupted, "Quiet. Don't talk about such things here. Keeping a canceled card in your purse just causes confusion." However, it seemed my in-laws overheard our conversation and looked at Dennis sternly. "Dennis, what are you doing? What do you mean you tried using Michelle's card? Taking it from her purse without permission is unacceptable." Well, there were some circumstances," Dennis stammered, but his father wasn't convinced. I decided to explain everything in detail, aiming to reveal Dennis's true behavior to his parents. For the past year, Dennis has hardly been home. At first, I understood, thinking he was busy because your company is large, father-in-law. But then, Dennis started going out even on holidays and missing important dates like my birthday and our anniversary. He also began caring more about his appearance and started using my credit card without my permission. My parents-in-law exchanged worried looks, realizing something was wrong. I asked Dennis to spend more time with me and to stop using the card without asking, but he argued that it's natural for a wife to support her husband. He didn't listen and even threatened me with divorce, showing me a divorce form he had already signed. "Divorce?" my father-in-law exclaimed in shock. "Have you been making Michelle suffer this much?" my mother-in-law added, raising her voice. My father-in-law stared sternly at his son, the image of Dennis as a model husband shattered. Though I hoped Dennis would admit his mistakes, he quickly denied everything. "No, that's not true. What Michelle is saying is baseless. I need to pay attention to my appearance because I'm preparing to take over as president. The meetings I attend on weekends are networking events and seminars for work. What's wrong with using joint funds for work-related purposes? If I stop earning, my wife would suffer too." Dennis tried desperately to defend himself. My in-laws stayed silent, possibly seeing some logic in his explanation and feeling unsure about how to respond. But I knew the truth he was trying to hide. No matter what excuses he made, they were meaningless. Oh, really? Can you still say it's part of your job after seeing this? I said as I decided to show more evidence to my in-laws. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a document. It listed dates, store names, and the amount spent. What is this? My father-in-law asked. This is a credit card statement, I replied. As you can see, it shows purchases of luxury items for women. Why would you have something like that? As I showed the document, my husband quickly tried to grab it, but I pulled it away and looked at him, demanding an explanation. Why did you buy luxury items for women with my credit card? Cosmetics and jewelry aren't part of your job, are they? Can you explain this? Those were gifts for the women at work, he stammered. I was giving them as birthday presents. It's important to be liked by women in business, you know. The expense was unavoidable. His explanation was confusing, but considering his work reputation, there might have been some truth to it. Saying it was for birthday presents might sound reasonable, but for the first time, my husband couldn't convince his parents. Whatever the reason, the fact is you used Michelle's card without her permission. If it was really necessary, you should have discussed it with her. Buying luxury brands because female colleagues asked for them doesn't seem believable, my father-in-law said sternly. I'm sorry. I apologize for using my wife's card. I promise never to do it again. Please forgive me, my husband said, trying to show remorse. But my father-in-law's anger didn't go away easily. Just because you're married doesn't mean you can use her credit card without asking. And since the amount is significant, make sure you pay Michelle back for the money you spent. All right, I'll refund the money, my husband said, looking down, appearing regretful. But I wasn't convinced. I knew he was still hiding something. This was just the beginning of the real test. We all headed to the room, where the other relatives were waiting. There, I took out my smartphone from my bag and pressed play. The sudden audio surprised my husband, and he looked at me in disbelief, his face quickly turning pale. The recording was of a conversation between a man and a woman, where my husband was insulting me and the woman was saying, "Hurry up and divorce your wife." The family members around us were shocked by what they heard. Dennis, who is this woman? I asked. My husband struggled to come up with an excuse, while his parents glared at him angrily. The relatives were also appalled by what they had just heard. Without a break from the credit card issue, my husband was now facing another crisis. There was no hiding it anymore. You were having an affair, weren't you? I confronted him. I stated firmly. My husband began to sweat and shouted, "That's not true. I'm not having an affair. It was wrong of me to speak badly about you, but she's just a friend, and we were just hanging out. By the way, when did you prepare this? Eavesdropping is illegal." Even though he admitted to insulting me, he kept denying the affair and tried to shift the blame onto me. But I wasn't backing down. I laid out the facts so he couldn't escape. Dennis, I've been watching you for a long time. The credit card history made the affair obvious. That's why, while you pretended to go to work, I installed a listening device in your car. A listening device in the car? That's ridiculous. As I said, eavesdropping is illegal. Do you understand that? He responded, trying to challenge me. If it's to catch evidence of infidelity, it's not illegal as long as it's not for stalking or similar behavior. I countered, showing I was prepared to do whatever it took to uncover the truth and protect myself. My husband fell silent, realizing he couldn't justify himself, but he still couldn't bring himself to admit the truth. Instead, he turned to his parents and the other relatives, pleading, "Everyone, please don't believe what she's saying. She's trying to trap me. I haven't been unfaithful." Sighing, I threw a document at him in front of everyone. "What's this?" he asked. "What do you think?" "It's a demand for compensation." My husband's face went pale. "This document is a compensation claim I sent to your mistress, Carol. It was confirmed through an investigation that you were having an affair with her. So I visited Carol and demanded compensation from her before coming to you." "You met Carol directly and demanded compensation? What were you thinking?" My husband was so shocked he was speechless. But he had no right to blame me when he was the one who made the mistake. Surprised? But she told me everything. She didn't hide your wrongdoings. You were buying luxury items for her with my credit card, weren't you? That excuse about gifts for female employees was obviously a lie. It was all for her. If the evidence is complete, it's undeniable, I continued. Carol also admitted to the affair and agreed to pay compensation because of what you did with my card. That's why I brought this compensation claim. My husband looked up at the sky, his face filled with despair. I waved the compensation claim in front of him. Unable to hide his frustration, he raised his voice. Damn, you planned all this without me noticing. You really are a cunning wife. A wife? I was your wife, but that's in the past. I told you a month ago that I quit. Didn't you hear? In fact, the divorce papers have already been submitted. I'm just an acquaintance now. Did you really submit the divorce papers? Why are you surprised? I replied. I simply submitted the divorce papers you waved in my face to make things difficult for me. Everything was done properly. Do you have any complaints? But you shouldn't just file for divorce on your own. Divorcing without talking it over is unreasonable, he protested. It might be unreasonable, but it doesn't change the fact that you used my credit card without permission. That's why I filed the divorce papers on my own. Now this matter is settled. My husband was speechless and shocked. It was clear he hadn't expected me to take such action. My in-laws and other relatives, watching the exchange, began to realize that my story was true. Using Michelle's credit card without permission and having an affair to think we believed you two were happily married and you were committing such betrayals, they said, their faces grim with anger as they sternly reprimanded him. My father-in-law firmly declared, this marks the end of our relationship as parent and child. Additionally, you are fired from the company. Fired just for an affair? This is too harsh. Think about it calmly, my husband protested. At that moment, a sharp snapping sound echoed. It was my mother-in-law who had slapped my husband hard on the cheek. Tears welled up in her eyes, a mix of sadness, pity, and disappointment. Just an affair? You're the one who's wrong, Dennis. You planned to hurt Michelle and just run away, she said, her voice filled with anger. My husband was silenced, saying nothing, as everyone's cold eyes bore into him. His words, just an affair, had revealed his irresponsibility. He had once loudly proclaimed that my money was his, and that a wife should devote herself to her husband. Such selfish attitudes were unforgivable. My husband remained silent for a while, but his stubbornness didn't break. He slowly raised his head and declared, it doesn't matter what happens, whether it's divorce or being fired. I'm going to be with Carol. What did you say? My in-laws gasped, stunned by his words. Even after being forced into a divorce, shunned by his family, and losing his job, my husband remained defiant. However, his attitude was reaching its limit. You might not know this, I said, but Carol has been seeing several other men as well. That's a lie. Carol loves only me. You're just jealous and making this up, he shot back. But this is the truth. She has relationships with multiple men, and you weren't the most important to her. Not the most important, he repeated, shocked. Yes, you weren't that significant to her. In fact, she paid the compensation to me quickly to avoid any trouble. I can't believe it. I didn't think Carol was that kind of woman, he muttered, struggling to accept the reality. The idea that Carol had real feelings for you was just a delusion. You were being used. By the way, the compensation she paid me was actually funded by another man she was seeing. That's a lie. There's no way Carol would deceive me. We're going to get married, and nothing you do can stop us, my husband insisted, still unable to accept the truth. I calmly confronted him with the truth. It's time for you to realize you've been abandoned. Haven't you noticed that you haven't been able to contact Carol lately? No calls or messages are getting through, right? My husband hesitated. Now that you mention it, he faltered, beginning to grasp the reality. In short, you are no longer needed. You've been blocked. I am no longer needed, he repeated, stunned. Yes, exactly. Do you understand now? There's nothing left for you. This is what happens to someone who deceives others like you have. After hearing this, he collapsed to his knees and bowed his head. Please, Michelle, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me, he pleaded, finally realizing the gravity of his situation. Please reconsider the divorce. Please stop the firing, he begged repeatedly, bowing to me and my in-laws. But everyone had already distanced themselves from him. "It's too late for apologies now," I said firmly. "I will demand the division of property and repayment of the money you wasted using my credit card. A person like you is just a nuisance to any organization. If you think you can work somewhere else, go ahead and try. It won't be worth it. Please don't leave me like this. I'm reflecting on my actions. Can I have just one more chance?" My husband continued to plead, tears in his voice, still bowing to his father. But my former father-in-law, having given up on him, ignored him and hurried out of the restaurant, followed by his wife. The relatives also started preparing to leave, showing no further interest in my husband. "Well, I'll settle the payment then," I said.
"What?
"You're paying the $51,000? "Of course I will. I'll bill it later," I replied with a sweet smile as he collapsed onto his knees. That day, my retaliation made it the most painful day of his life, but the story wasn't over yet. His ordeal would continue. After the incident, I returned to my parents' house, but for the past few days, I've been getting numerous missed calls, all from my ex-husband, Dennis. The phone kept ringing nonstop, and I knew why. I had been deliberately ignoring him, but this time, I decided to answer the phone to deliver the final blow. "Michelle, you finally answered.
Please help me out."
"I'm truly in trouble," he begged. "Sounds like a tough situation. What's going on? Are you trying to escape debt collectors?"
"What?"
"How did you know that? Did someone tell you?"
"No, irraplia."
"I found out on my own, Dennis. You've built up a lot of debt, haven't you? Not only were you giving money to your mistress, but I also learned that you were paying your coworkers to do your job. Even though they refused, you forced them to do it by using your position as the boss's son. You used dirty tricks to keep up appearances at the company while you enjoyed your affairs in your free time, taking on debt just to get what you wanted. Such foolish actions. On the day the family gathered at that fancy restaurant, when the credit card was declined, you were supposed to pay the $51,000 yourself. But I knew you couldn't because I had already found out about your significant debt. Dennis, this is all you're doing. But you're capable, aren't you? Leaving your father's company shouldn't be a problem for you, right? You should be able to excel elsewhere. Well, the truth is I haven't found another job yet. All the interviews have been unsuccessful, and I'm being chased for my debts. It's really affecting me mentally." "That's exactly what I expected," I said. "What can you expect from someone who pushed their work onto others just to make themselves look good? Even if you find another job, it won't last. Don't you understand that?" Dennis couldn't respond because my accusations were spot on. Unless he reflects on his actions and changes his ways, he'll keep making the same mistakes. If things continue like this, he'll only face more misery, even without my involvement. "Michelle, I truly regret everything. I should have appreciated you more. I should have worked sincerely at my father's company, but I didn't. I'm really sorry. Can we start over?" "I'm afraid that's impossible," I replied. "I believe people can change, but some actions are unforgivable. You deceived not only me but also many others who trusted you. You need to pay the price for that. And yes, you will also fully repay the property division and the money you misused. Escaping responsibility is not an option." After confirming that Dennis had gone silent again, I calmly ended the call. A few days later, I heard more about Dennis's situation from my former in-laws. As expected, he hadn't found a stable job and ended up seeking help from his family. "I need help because we're family. Is it okay for your son to end up like this?" He was desperately pleading for support. He ignored his family and deceived his relatives, only to ask for help when he was in trouble. How can he think such self-centered behavior is acceptable? His thinking has always been selfish, focused only on himself. The reason Dennis lived so comfortably up until now was because of the help and support from those around him. But I never once heard a word of gratitude from him. If only I had seen his true nature before getting married. I would have never married him. I deeply regret going through everything alone without talking to anyone. If I had spoken to my in-laws or other relatives sooner, maybe my future would have turned out completely different. From now on, I will be more honest with myself, aiming to become stronger and more determined. It's time to say goodbye to the weaker version of myself and step forward with confidence into a new beginning.